The year 2478 marked humanity's golden age of interstellar expansion. Among the countless marvels of engineering that made this expansion possible, perhaps none were more impressive than the massive shipyards that orbited distant worlds. Arcos 7, nestled in the Cygna Prime asteroid belt, stood as one of the most prestigious of these construction facilities, specializing in zero-gravity engineering. The station produced vessels that carried both the hopes and ambitions of the Interspecies Alliance to the farthest reaches of charted space. Lyra Kyan watched the rhythmic pulse of the station's artificial gravity indicators from her workstation. The green lights blinked in perfect synchrony, a visual confirmation of the steady 0.8 G that permeated the facility. Without that manufactured gravitational field, the enormous shipbuilding bays would be a chaotic mess of floating tools, materials, and, occasionally, engineers who'd forgotten to secure their tethers. "Balance check," a voice called from behind her. Lyra turned to see Joran, her closest friend and the station's lead computer engineer, floating toward her workstation. Despite the station's artificial gravity, he preferred using the ceiling-mounted handrails to move around, claiming it kept his zero-G reflexes sharp. His dark curls bobbed slightly as he adjusted his trajectory. "All systems nominal," Lyra responded, gesturing to the monitors. "Like always." Joran snorted. "You sound disappointed." "Maybe I am." Lyra stretched, feeling the familiar pull of the artificial gravity against her limbs. At 28, she was among the youngest senior design engineers on Arcos 7, having earned her position through what her colleagues sometimes begrudgingly called intuitive physics. Where others needed complex simulations and calculations, Lyra seemed to feel designs in her body, instinctively understanding how structures would behave in various gravitational fields. "The Centauri delegation arrives tomorrow," Joran reminded her, bringing up a holographic display of their upcoming schedule. "Commander Saul wants the prototype ready for demonstration." Lyra nodded, her eyes drifting to the massive chamber beyond the viewport, where her team's latest creation hung suspended in a zero-gravity construction cradle. The Starbridge-class Explorer was sleek and elegant, designed for long-range scientific missions into uncharted regions. It represented months of work, countless simulations, and dozens of design iterations. "It's ready," she said. "Though I still think the inertial dampeners could be more responsive. There's a slight lag when transitioning between gravitational fields." "A lag that's within Alliance specifications," Joran pointed out. "Specifications aren't everything," Lyra muttered. "But yes, it passes all the tests." As the evening shift wound down, Lyra lingered in her office, reviewing the final diagnostics for tomorrow's demonstration. Most of the station had transitioned to night mode, with skeleton crews maintaining essential systems while the majority of the 5,000 inhabitants slept or relaxed in their quarters. The first indication that something was wrong came as a subtle sensation in her inner ear, a momentary disconnection between what her eyes told her and what her body felt. Lyra froze, her hand hovering over the display. Then, as quickly as it had come, the sensation passed. "Curious," she murmured, making a mental note to check the gravity regulation logs in the morning. She never got the chance. At precisely 0247 station time, Lyra was jolted from sleep by blaring alarms. The emergency lighting had activated, bathing her quarters in pulsing red. More disturbing was the sensation of her body drifting upward from her bed, her long black hair floating around her face like a halo. "Attention all personnel," Commander Kara Sol's voice echoed through the station-wide communication system. "We are experiencing a critical malfunction in the gravity control systems. Secure yourselves and your equipment. Engineering teams are working to stabilize the situation." Lyra reached for the emergency tether beside her bed, clipping it to her sleep clothes before activating her personal communicator. "Kane to engineering. What's happening?" "Lyra, thank the stars," it was Joran's voice, tight with stress. "The primary gravity controls have gone haywire. We've got fluctuations throughout the station, some sections at 0 G, others experiencing up to 1.5 G, and a few reporting negative gravity fields. Negative gravity? Lyra repeated, her mind racing to understand. That's not possible with our systems. Tell that to Section 12, where everything's stuck to the ceiling. Joran replied grimly. We need you in central engineering. Navigating the station proved to be a challenge, unlike anything Lyra had experienced in her 6 years on Arcos 7. The corridors alternated between weightlessness, normal gravity, and bizarre pockets where gravity seemed to pull at odd angles. Twice she encountered sections where the gravitational direction shifted every few seconds, forcing her to time her movements carefully. When she finally arrived at central engineering, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Engineers and technicians were secured to workstations with tethers, while Commander Sol floated near the central holographic display, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a severe bun that somehow remained perfect despite the zero-gravity environment. Kane, Sol acknowledged with a nod. Perhaps you can make sense of this. The gravity systems are receiving contradictory commands, and we can't isolate the source. Lyra pushed herself toward the main diagnostic console, where Joran was already deep in analysis. The data streaming across the screens showed patterns that made no sense. The gravity plating throughout the station was cycling through settings seemingly at random, creating the patchwork of gravitational fields that had made her journey so treacherous. This isn't a malfunction, Lyra said after studying the patterns for several minutes. The system is responding correctly to the commands it's receiving. The problem is the commands themselves. Meaning? Commander Sol asked, her expression grim. Someone has introduced a foreign algorithm into the control systems. Joran confirmed, pointing to a section of code. It's sophisticated, designed to evade security protocols by disguising itself as routine maintenance adjustments. Sabotage, Sol said flatly. Lyra nodded. And whoever did it knows our systems intimately. Over the next 48 hours, the engineering teams worked tirelessly to counteract the rogue program. They managed to establish some stability by isolating critical sections of the station, including life support in the medical bay, but the majority of Arcos 7 remained in a state of gravitational flux. Attempts to purge the system entirely failed when they discovered the algorithm had embedded copies of itself throughout the station's network. We need to rebuild the entire control system from scratch, one of the senior engineers insisted during an emergency meeting in the now stable conference room. That would take weeks, another countered, and we'd have to shut down the station entirely. What about the shipbuilding projects? A third asked. The Alliance is expecting deliveries. Commander Sol silenced the debate with a raised hand. The Alliance has been notified of our situation. They're sending technical experts, but the nearest qualified team is 4 days out. Until then, we adapt. What if we don't fight it? Lyra said suddenly, drawing everyone's attention. Explain, Sol demanded. The algorithm isn't damaging our systems, it's just making the gravity unpredictable. What if, instead of shutting down operations, we lean into it, use this as an opportunity? The room erupted in protests, but Sol's raised eyebrow invited Lyra to continue. Our ships are designed to operate in all kinds of gravitational conditions, Lyra pointed out. But we always build them in a stable environment. What if we constructed and tested vessels under these fluctuating conditions? The results might be interesting. You want to build ships in this chaos? The incredulous question came from an older engineer whom Lyra recognized as Elo 10, one of the station's founding designers. I think it's worth trying, she replied. A ship that performs well under these conditions would likely excel in any gravitational anomaly it might encounter in deep space. To Lyra's surprise, Commander Sol nodded slowly. Assemble a volunteer team. Kine, you have my authorization to continue work on non-critical projects, but safety protocols are doubled. I won't have injuries because of this experiment. Thank you, Commander. I'll call it the Balance Challenge. The name stuck. Within days, Lyra had assembled a team of 15 engineers, mostly younger staff who shared her enthusiasm for the unorthodox approach. They selected a small scout vessel that had been in the early stages of construction as their test subject. The ship, originally designated XS-42, was quickly nicknamed Wobble by the team. Working in the unstable gravitational fields proved both challenging and enlightening. Traditional construction methods had to be abandoned, as tools and materials would suddenly float away or become too heavy to move. The team learned to anticipate the gravity fluctuations, developing a sixth sense for when a section would shift from weightlessness to heavy gravity. "It's like dancing," Lyra explained to a skeptical Commander Sol during an inspection. "You feel the rhythm of the changes and move with them rather than against them." Sol watched as Lyra's team coordinated a tricky welding operation, timing their movements to coincide with a predictable pattern of gravitational shifts. "Impressive adaptation," the commander admitted. "But how does this improve the vessel itself?" "We're rebuilding the inertial dampening system to respond more intuitively to gravitational changes," Lyra explained. "Traditional designs have a processing delay as they analyze and counteract gravitational forces. Our new system anticipates changes based on probability matrices we're developing from the patterns here on the station." "And you believe this will translate to better performance in the field?" "I know it will," Lyra said with conviction. Not everyone shared her enthusiasm. 3 other teams had initially volunteered for the balance challenge, but 2 had already abandoned their projects after a series of minor accidents and frustrations. The remaining team, led by a seasoned engineer named Varric, was making progress but lacked the intuitive approach that gave Lyra's team their edge. More concerning were the whispers spreading through the station. Some suggested that the continued gravitational issues were being deliberately prolonged to accommodate Lyra's experiment. Others questioned the wisdom of allowing critical resources to be allocated to what they viewed as a frivolous exercise while the station remained compromised. LO-10 became the unofficial spokesperson for these concerns. "This entire challenge is a distraction from the real issue," he declared during a staff meeting 2 weeks into the crisis. "We should be focusing all our efforts on restoring proper gravitational control, not indulging Kane's pet project." "The technical team from the Alliance arrives tomorrow," Commander Sol reminded him. "And Kane's project has approval as long as it doesn't interfere with essential operations." "Which it does," Ten insisted. "Her team has requisitioned components that could be used to repair the gravity systems." "Different components, actually," Joran interjected, displaying the requisition lists side by side. "Lyra's team is using primarily adaptation modules, not control units." The argument might have escalated further if not for a sudden gravity shift that sent several unsecured tablets floating toward the ceiling, effectively ending the meeting in a scramble to retrieve them. Later that evening, as Lyra worked late in a secluded diagnostic bay, she noticed an anomaly in the data streams she was monitoring. The gravitational fluctuations, while seemingly random, occasionally displayed patterns that were too regular, almost like a signature or a communication. "Joran," she called through her communicator, "can you meet me in Diagnostic Bay 7 and bring your encryption tools?" When Joran arrived, Lyra showed him what she'd found. "Look at these sequences. They repeat at intervals of exactly 47.3 minutes. Joran studied the patterns, his expression growing more concerned. "That's not random at all. Someone's using the gravity fluctuations to transmit data. Can you decode it?" "Maybe. Give me some time." It took 3 days of secret work, conducted between their official duties, but eventually, Joran cracked the code. "It's a communication protocol," he explained, showing Lyra the results. "Someone on the station is using the gravity systems to send messages to a receiver somewhere in the outer ring." "What kind of messages?" "Technical specifications, mostly. Details about our newest ship designs, security protocols. It's essentially industrial espionage." Lyra felt cold anger building inside her. "Can you trace the source?" "Not precisely, but I can narrow it down to a section. The signals originate from the senior engineering quarters. Hello, 10, Lyra said immediately. Joran looked uncomfortable. That's a serious accusation, Lyra. 10 helped build this station. He's respected throughout the Alliance, and he's been the most vocal opponent of my project. He's also been suspiciously insistent that we restore the original gravity control systems rather than developing new solutions. Still, we need proof before we take this to Commander Sol. They found their opportunity the next day when Elo 10 left his quarters for a scheduled inspection of the outer ring. Joran, using his authority as head of computer systems, gained access to 10's personal terminal. What they discovered confirmed Lyra's suspicions and revealed something even more disturbing. He's not working alone, Joran whispered, displaying a series of encrypted communications. There's an entire group. They call themselves Static Core. They believe that stable gravitational environments are essential for proper ship construction. According to these messages, they sabotage the gravity systems to demonstrate what happens when their expertise is ignored. They caused all this just to prove a point? Lyra was incredulous. It's worse than that. They've been selling proprietary designs to outside interests in exchange for support. And they're planning something big for tomorrow, a complete gravitational reversal throughout the station during the Alliance inspection. That could be catastrophic, Lyra realized. We need to tell Sol immediately. Commander Sol listened to their evidence in grim silence before activating station-wide security protocols. We'll apprehend 10 and his accomplices discreetly, she decided. But that still leaves us with the problem of tomorrow's potential sabotage. Can you prevent it? Joran shook his head. The program is too deeply embedded. If we attempt to remove it, it could trigger fail-safes that might cause even more damage. What about using it against them? Lyra suggested. If we can predict when the gravitational reversal will happen, we can be prepared, and it might give us an opportunity to demonstrate the advantages of our new design. Commander Sol considered this. What do you have in mind? The next morning, the Alliance inspection team arrived on schedule. The delegation included representatives from 3 different species, all members of the interstellar coalition that funded Arcos 7. Commander Sol welcomed them in the main reception bay, which had been stabilized for the occasion. We understand you've been experiencing some technical difficulties, said the lead inspector, a tall, blue-skinned Centauri female. Our engineers are prepared to assist. Actually, Sol replied with a carefully controlled smile. We've managed to turn the situation into an opportunity for innovation. I'd like to show you something our teams have been developing in response to the gravitational anomalies. She led the delegation to a large observation deck overlooking the main construction bay. Below them, Lyra's ship, now officially designated Adaptive Scout XS-42, floated in a launching cradle. This vessel has been built entirely under fluctuating gravitational conditions, Sol explained. Engineer Kane will demonstrate its capabilities. Lyra's voice came through the communication system as she prepared for launch from within the ship. XS-42 ready for demonstration, all systems nominal. As the inspection team watched, the small scout vessel detached from its cradle and moved smoothly into the center of the bay. Its hull gleamed under the bright lights, the adaptive panels visibly adjusting as it encountered different gravitational pockets. Conventional ships would require constant thruster adjustments to maintain position in these conditions, Commander Sol explained. But the XS-42 uses a new type of inertial dampening system that anticipates and compensates for gravitational changes almost instantaneously. The Centauri inspector looked impressed. And this was developed as a direct result of your technical difficulties. Exactly. Engineer Kyan recognized that the unpredictable environment could actually lead to more robust designs. At that moment, Joran's voice came through Lyra's private channel. They're initiating the sequence. Gravitational reversal in 30 seconds. Inside the cockpit, Lyra took a deep breath. This is it, she murmured to herself, fingers dancing across the controls as she prepared the ship's systems. Time to dance. The reversal, when it came, was more violent than they had anticipated. Throughout the station, gravity suddenly inverted, sending unsecured objects crashing toward the ceiling. In the observation deck, the inspection team was saved from injury by emergency magnetic boots that automatically activated, securing them to the floor. Commander Sol, forewarned, had already anchored herself to a railing. In the construction bay, chaos erupted as tools, materials, and even smaller vessels were pulled violently upward. But amidst the mayhem, the XS-42 remained remarkably stable, its systems adapting to the sudden change with only minimal adjustment. Remarkable, the Centauri inspector breathed, watching as Lyra's ship navigated through the inverted environment with apparent ease. Then, just as they had predicted, the saboteurs triggered their next phase, a complete gravitational collapse throughout the station. Suddenly, everything was in zero-G, floating freely as though the station had been plunged into deep space. Accessing remote override, Lyra reported through the communication system, beginning countermeasures. Using the access codes Joran had extracted from TEN's files, Lyra connected to the station's central computer system from her ship. As she worked to counter the sabotage program, she simultaneously had to navigate the increasingly chaotic environment of the construction bay, where floating debris now posed a serious collision risk. "The gravitational fluctuations are intensifying," Joran warned over the comm. "They're fighting back." Lyra felt sweat beading on her forehead as she guided the ship through a particularly dense cluster of debris, while simultaneously executing complex override commands. The ship responded beautifully, its adaptive systems compensating for the wildly fluctuating gravitational fields with minimal input from her. "Almost there," she muttered, fingers flying across the interface. "Just need to isolate the core algorithm and—" "Got it!" With a final command sequence, Lyra locked down the sabotage program, freezing its execution mid-cycle. Throughout the station, the gravitational field stabilized, not returning to normal, but at least ceasing their erratic fluctuations. "Security teams report that 10 and 4 accomplices have been apprehended," Commander Sol announced over the general channel. "Well done, Engineer Kine." The following weeks saw a flurry of activity as the station's systems were methodically purged of the sabotage program and restored to their normal operation. The Alliance inspection team, far from being disappointed by the disruption, had been impressed by the innovative response to the crisis. They commissioned an expanded version of Lyra's adaptive inertial dampening system for implementation in future vessels. LO-10 and his co-conspirators faced serious charges of sabotage, espionage, and endangering station personnel. During interrogation, 10 revealed that his group had become convinced that the Alliance's push for faster, more efficient shipbuilding methods was compromising quality and safety. Their solution, to demonstrate the importance of stable construction environments by creating the opposite, had backfired spectacularly. "The irony," Joran commented to Lyra as they watched the security footage of 10's confession, "is that they actually prove the opposite of what they intended. Your ship performs better than anything we've built under stable conditions." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "Because we had to think differently. When everything works perfectly, there's little incentive to innovate beyond incremental improvements." 6 months after the gravity incident, as it came to be known, Arcos 7 had fully recovered, but the station had changed in fundamental ways. Under Commander Sol's direction, and with Alliance approval, a new training protocol had been implemented for all engineering teams, the official Balance Challenge. One section of the station was permanently configured to produce controlled gravitational fluctuations, creating a training ground where engineers could learn to work in unpredictable environments. Ships constructed in this zone were subjected to a battery of tests that conventional vessels often failed, leading to new standards for adaptive systems throughout the Alliance fleet. Lyra, now heading her own division, stood in her new office overlooking the balance zone. Through the viewport, she could see teams of engineers navigating the shifting gravitational fields, building the next generation of vessels designed to withstand the most extreme conditions space could offer. "The Alliance Committee is here for your presentation," Joran announced from the doorway. "They're eager to see the military applications of the adaptive technology." Lyra smiled. "Tell them I'll be right there." As she gathered her materials, her gaze fell on a small model of the XS-42 displayed prominently on her desk, a reminder of how a crisis, even one born of malice, could spark innovation beyond what anyone had imagined possible. "Sometimes," she murmured to herself, repeating what had become something of a personal mantra, "you have to lose your balance to find a better way to stand." With that thought, she straightened her uniform and headed to the conference room, where the future of interstellar ship design awaited her vision.